I think the primary problem with the truth movement today is basically the many competing conspiracy theories that have pretty much emanated from people who are irresponsible. A lot of these organizations that have these conspiracy theorists as board members and leaders have literally ruined any type of rational discussion in the last 15 years regarding this. In fact, from my own personal experience, from visiting forums online, most of the conversations surround World Trade Center 7 and how it collapsed and whether it came down by controlled demolition, or CGI planes and no hijackers, and fake phone calls and fake planes, or planes dressed as the airliners, but they are actually drones with nobody inside them. Many nukes in the World Trade Center basement, all that stuff. Now, I'll leave the physics and engineering to the side because basically I'm less than a layman in terms of knowledge regarding this issue. So I'm going to leave architects and engineers off the discussion here today and focus primarily on the geopolitical context of 9/11, what I think needs to happen for the future in order to go forward instead of backwards. And the problem that inflicts these truth movements, such as 9/11 Lawyers Committee for 9/11 and 9/11 Truth Action Project, the two major ones, is that, and also We Are Change, New York and LA, unfortunately, Nelson Martins and Ed Brotherton, I believe, are disbanded the group, which is unfortunate because they're two really solid people. But I think what the problem with these organizations is that for so long they have been adhering to the rabid conspiracy theories that have dominated the spectrum today in terms of 9/11. I think from my personal experience, no other human event in history has been so immediately beset by irrational conspiracy theories. I mean, to the point where it's laughable. You can't get a serious conversation anywhere regarding this issue, and that's the real crime and the real abuse that people like myself or Ryan Dawson or Nelson Martins take daily, is because we are trying to have rational dialogue about this subject, and instead we get in the comment section about if we're shills or government assets because we think a plane, American Airlines 77, crashed in the Pentagon. And so what I'm proposing for the 9/11 Truth Movement is a new movement, and a new movement that isn't adhering to physics or engineering, but instead to the geopolitical aspects of the terrorist attacks of September 11th, and with strict vetting. In other words, we don't just allow anybody to come in. We want to know what this person knows and not believes. And that's another thing, too, I'll get into in a bit. So this is what I'm proposing. I think what needs to be done quickly rather than later. Take your time, because time is not on our side. We're coming up on the 19th year since the terrorist attacks of September 11th, and next year is the big 2-0. And we haven't gotten anywhere. Truth movements have not gotten anywhere. Like I said, I'll leave architects and engineers on the side. But in regards to Lawyers Committee for 9/11 and Truth Action Project, they've gone backwards, not going forwards. In fact, the only real organization, and it's a lawyer firm, it's not even a truth movement, Motley Rice, they're the only organization that has actually gotten somewhere. In fact, they went to New York and they have actually gotten, just recently, released some documents regarding Saudi financing of the terrorist attacks. The problem with Lawyers Committee for 9/11 and Truth Action Project is that they have board members on their committees that don't believe in hijackers, don't believe in a plane crashing into the Pentagon, or Flight 77 crashing into the Pentagon. They don't believe a plane at all crashed into Pennsylvania. So that means if you don't have planes, that means you don't have hijackers. And if you don't have hijackers, you don't have people on the plane making phone calls because they're the ones who are saying that there's hijackers on board. In fact, those two organizations are saying the phone calls are faked. And that goes all the way back to a so-called researcher named David Ray Griffin, who actually says that the phone calls were manipulated. And I'm here to tell you that that is false. In fact, the founder of voice morphing technology, George, has come out as early as 2005 suggesting that live voice morphing is impossible to do in the year 2001. And that's the founder of voice morphing technology. Did they make these necessary corrections? Of course. They still purport these conspiracy theories because it fits a narrative that they want to keep. And these narratives are usually that the State Department, the CIA, or the Illuminati are involved. So you have a separate issue of the Israeli Mossad were the ones, or the Israeli government were responsible for the 9/11 attacks, and they used the Saudis as patsies, or that the Saudis weren't even on the planes at all. All of this is obviously incorrect. Not totally, though. And what I'm going to get into is this, that there were hijackers on these planes. In fact, there were supposed to be more planes involved, but thanks to the ground suspension by CEO of the United Airlines, Gerald Larpy, we saved at least one plane from being hijacked, United Airlines Flight 23. The Truth Movement today, the Lawyers Committee and Truth Action Project, who purport that no plane hit the Pentagon and no plane hit Shanksville, who are they blaming? Well, they're blaming Israel and the State Department. But how? For example, here's what I'm insinuating, that these truth movements are making a big error. And they're basically, I don't want to say they're flat out lying. I think these people are basically victims themselves, but you have some people that refuse to change their position because they're stubborn, and they themselves don't want to be ostracized by their own organization and the subsequent disbanding of their following. Without hijackers on these planes, you don't have the CIA monitoring them abroad since 1996. You don't have German officials from the BFV, German intelligence ring, following members of the Hamburg cell who hijacked Flight 175 and 11. You don't have the Saudi General Intelligence Directorate monitoring and funding Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and Hani Hanjour out west. Without hijackers, you don't have the Israeli Mossad using front-moving companies in New York, New Jersey, and Florida to follow the Hamburg cell in the east. That's Mohammed Atta, Marwan al-Shay'i, and Ziad Jarrah. So basically, what you have is an absolvement of these organizations. If you don't have hijackers, you don't have hijacked planes, you don't have calls. Incidentally enough, it's some of the phone calls, some of them, that completely contradict the FBI's pet bomb investigation and what they found, and the 9/11 Commission's final report and what they found on these planes. That's the irony of all this, is that you have these truth movements, some of these board members and followers who cater to their conspiracy theories, is that they're throwing away great evidence which contradicts the very agencies that they claim are involved with 9/11. Now, what I propose about a new truth movement is that this truth movement actually concentrates on the important issues that are overlooked or ignored altogether by the 9/11 truth movements organizations today. And that is the Alex Station, headed by the CIA, Able Danger, headed by the DIA, and the two foreign intelligence rings that were following the hijackers. That's the Israeli Mossad, who's in the front moving companies out east, and the Saudi General Intelligence GID operatives in Osama Basnan and Omar al-Bayoumi out west. And that's an important issue because Omar al-Bayoumi and Osama Basnan got their money from the bank account of Haifa bin Faisal, who is the wife of Bandar bin Sultan, the Saudi U.S. ambassador to the United States and close friend to not only George H.W. Bush, Bush Sr., but close friend to George W. Bush Jr. So by throwing away the hijackers and claiming that they're patsies, never board these planes, meanwhile you have ticket agents, you have Dulles camera video, which shows the hijackers going through security checkpoint and through Flight 77. And if you're saying that because it doesn't have a timestamp, it could have been taken any day, it was video. Well, first of all, that's not true. It's a Verint system, and a Verint system doesn't have a timestamp. And Motley Rice is the one that got the video released, and it was from a FOIA request in regards to the victims' families that they're counseling in regards to the New York Court of Appeals hearing. And they won, actually, so they're going forward with their lawsuit against the Saudi government, which they were trying for years to block, headed by Judge George Daniels, who is sitting on the case itself. The video itself shows one of the victims of Flight 77, Marie Ray Sopper, and she's one of the primary people in the video. You actually see her carrying a cat. She's actually carrying her cat on board. She never flew before. And that she puts it in a red animal cargo holder. You can see her walking away with it. And right behind her is Khalid al-Minar and Majid Market, two hijackers for Flight 77. What the truth movement, this new idea I'm trying to implement here, which I would love to see take place, and an idea that me and a very good researcher of mine, I consider him the favorite, most responsible researcher I've ever come across, Nelson Martins. We've come up with this idea that the truth movement needs a new movement, and that this movement needs to concentrate on the sensitive areas of the geopolitics of 9/11, pre and post. And this has to basically have a core group of dedicated individuals who are not persuaded by any type of human construct, whether it be politics, racism, or religion. A real researcher is not persuaded by anything but the evidence before them, whether it may lead them to a road that they don't like. The facts never change. And we don't want people to follow. We don't want followers. I don't want people to follow me, for example. I have a website here on YouTube. I've had over 1,000 videos. I have written work on medium.com. I have a Twitter account too, but what I don't want is people to follow me. What I want is for them to trust me, to trust the information I get, and by doing that, you take the information which is presented on my channel and you do the research to see whether it's true or not. And then what I'm hoping in return is that you take that information over time and that you then spread it to other individuals. In other words, if you're the student, you now become the teacher. And that you then have other people, instead of following you, they become leaders. And that's the type of movement I want. I don't want somebody at the top of the head and, everyone else is just listening to me. And that's it. And they just believe whatever I say. No, I don't want that. What I want through this movement is a bunch of people, dedicated individuals. And I don't even want it to be a large movement. We just need enough quality over quantity, and that's another thing the truth movements don't have, where we concentrate on, like I said, the geopolitical context of 9/11. And in order to do that, we have to go back a certain point in time and to understand the foreign policies of the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Egypt. Yeah, it's a broad concept. 9/11 isn't simple. It's not as simple as CGI planes or nuclear warheads and suitcases in the basement of the World Trade Center, or no hijackers on any of these planes. This is all ridiculous, and it leads to nowhere. None of these people like Christopher Bolin, CIT, Barbara Honegger, Rebecca Roth, Jim Fetzer, the Godfather of Conspiracy, Alex Jones, all these people, Loose Change. I could give you a list of 50. John Lear, Morgan Reynolds, Judy Wood. A lot of these people have manipulated and lied to millions of people. And this is the reason why 9/11 discussion has been suppressed for so many years. Like I said before, you're barely ever going to find rational discourse in this day and age anywhere. And that's, like I said, that's the crime. And it's a serious topic. It's such a broad and complex topic. Look, I'm not an expert by any means. I'm a regular guy. This is my room, my bedroom. I read a lot of books about the subject. And I'm not a teacher, or I'm not an expert on any type of religious fundamentalism or the intelligence agency. But I just happen to care about the facts of the case. And there's so little facts, there's so much manipulation and disinformation that it is hard for the average person to know what is true and what is not. And, I have time to myself, and a lot of people don't have time. I mean, that's another thing, too, that this government realizes, is that reading is not a fundamental issue for many people. Suppress documents and files in the National Archives for the next 30 or 40 years. But you can know, we could put enough pieces together, we don't have to build the whole puzzle, but we have enough pieces of the puzzle to put together and have sort of a visual outlook of what the picture involves. So what I would imply to these very few reputable truth members of these truth movements, and what I would tell them is to get out of these movements. And why someone like Barbara Honegger couldn't, right? Because Barbara Honegger, who's a board member of 9/11 Lawyers Committee, she's also a very high-profile truther who doesn't believe in hijackers. She doesn't believe Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, doesn't believe Flight 93 crashed in Shanksville. And when I used to have a Facebook account, I told her that, you can never stop believing that, because once you do, and you do tell the truth that Flight 77 did crash into the Pentagon, and Flight 93 did crash in Shanksville, that what will happen to you is what will happen to anybody who indulges in the facts of the case in these truth movements, is that she'll be chastised and denounced and thrown out of these committees, and all of her followers will basically become her detractors, and she'll be hounded for the rest of her life. It's almost like a cult, these movements. Truth Action Project, definitely, and that's a sad thing because there are few there. The founder of it, Wayne Costi, basically left because the committee members have become, these radical theorists, and they're very fanatic. And, they join in groups, and they don't join in individuals. They're like a pack of dogs. They attack you. So that's not what truth movements, any honest truth movement would do. And that's true. And because there's hardly any plane debris at the Pentagon or in Shanksville, because we saw videos on data, there's hardly any pictures. Oh, and they, in broad daylight, they were dumping these plane debris, and nobody. Well, you have over 100 people that saw a plane hit the Pentagon. And they found 179 of the 186 people that were killed through human remains and DNA, which was sent to Dover Mortuary. In Flight 93, which is the big issue here, because Flight 93, they found more parts of that plane than any of the sites. And yeah, these planes were going at 560 miles an hour. So you're not going to get much in the way of large plane debris. Don't compare plane crashes because that's disingenuous. You got to know the trajectory of the plane, how fast they were going, was it fully loaded? So all these factors come into play. And Flight 93 was going at 563 miles an hour, nose diving into the ground. There's not going to be wings and tails. They found, incidentally, the engines of the plane, tattered in pieces, clothes of the passengers hanging from the trees, the fuselage, and, of course, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. And what was said in the cockpit voice recording was really revealing. And that was played for the victims' families. But the transcript's online, and go take a look. And Flight 93 is the real anomaly, because according to the 9/11 Commission and to the FBI Pentagon investigation, it was 4 hijackers of that plane. And because these truth movements don't believe in phone calls, and the phone calls made on that flight was the most damning in regards to contradicting the 9/11 Commission and the FBI. 6 phone calls stated that there were 3 hijackers on board. 3. Where's the 4th hijacker? Well, if you watch the transcript, supposedly Ziad is the pilot. Well, listen to the phone calls. 2 phone calls, one made by Sandra Bradshaw and Jeremy Glick, a passenger, stated that they saw 3 men, dark-skinned males, wearing red bandanas. Take a look at Ziad picture. So that's just one anomaly, which is contradictory to the official or the incomplete report of the 9/11 Commission and the Pentagon investigation. Why are they lying about it? Why didn't the 9/11 Commission talk about the interview of George W. Bush and Dick Cheney in the White House, which is we can't even see the transcript. It's not made public. What about the testimony of former NSA analyst Thomas Drake, who gave prima facie evidence, according to him, about having information about all the hijackers before 9/11 happened, since 1999. It was the NSA who had a tap on the phone line of the Ahmed al-Hada Yemeni hub, which is basically the al-Qaeda switchboard around the world. And this hub is based in Sana'a, Yemen, which was owned by Ahmed al-Hada, a close associate of Osama bin Laden from his days in Afghanistan during the Soviet-Afghanistan War in 1979. And also, he's the father-in-law to Khalid al-Mihdhar, one of the hijackers of Flight 77. The NSA had a tap on the line since 1996. How they got that number was through a tap on bin Laden's satellite phone since 1992 to 1998, when bin Laden ditched the phone. And the NSA claims that they only had the number since 98, but they had the number since 96, according to the CIA and the FBI, because they got that number because it was stated 56 times through bin Laden's phone. And they red flagged it. The CIA, who was in charge of the Ahmed al-Hada home, basically wanted the transcripts or the cables translated from the incoming and receiving calls. Now, the CIA had a listening bug inside the house, but they didn't have a tap on the phone, so they couldn't listen to the phone calls that were incoming. And that's what Michael Scheuer, who was the deputy chief of Alex Station, wanted. And the NSA rebuffed him. In fact, Deputy Director Barbara McNamara of the NSA actually said, if you try to reveal our phone line, we'll sue you and Scheuer back down. So what was said on those phone calls? So we go between 1996 and 2001. That's 5 years of daily phone call records. 5 years. And what was said on those lines? Well, according to Thomas Drake and crypto analyst William Binney, they said that they basically had all the information regarding the hijackings, that they could have stopped them. I believe. The NSA says, well, we didn't have the manpower. This is coming from former director of the NSA, Michael Hayden. He says, we just didn't have the manpower to go through all the transcripts. Which I think would be false, because this was a very important line. It's a red line, which is an important line. And they knew the importance of this operation. Now, the CIA basically monitoring the hijackers out abroad in the Malaysia meeting of 2000, in Germany, through them monitoring two known al-Qaeda Syrian operatives in Mohammed Haydar Zamar and Marmoon Darkanzali, who basically helped form the Hamburgs of Muhammad Atta, Ziad Jarrah, and Marwan al-Shayh. And if you take a look at the background of Ziad Jarrah, his family background, I'm not going to reveal it here, but to the people who cater to no hijackers and no planes and no phone calls and all these ridiculous conspiracy theories, just take a look at just Muhammad Atta and Ziad Jarrah. And you'll see the fingerprints of intelligence of all these people. And this is the evidence you're willing to throw away because you were told by known frauds that there were no hijackers, there were no planes, there were no phone calls. In fact, these planes were drones, and that they were flown in somewhere in an underground bunker by Dobbs that kind through a joystick. That's silly. And you can't blame anybody. And the people that were involved in monitoring these hijackers or financing these hijackers and not telling the State Department or the FBI while they were here in the United States, the Israelis and the Saudi agents that were here 2 years prior. Now, I'm not even going to talk about the Amdocs investigation, where we had over 250 Israelis monitoring the DEA, the FBI, and the State Department, or the drug ring, headed by Cookie Orgard. And that's where Black Operation money comes from. And their tremendously huge ecstasy ring here in New York and Texas. Go read the Gerald Shea memo. Gerald Shea, who was a former Chicago lawyer, did an investigation of his own talking about these rings specifically, the three rings, the drug ring, the intelligence ring, and the Mossad moving front companies that were monitoring these hijackers in Florida, New Jersey, and New York. Go look at the FBI field reports regarding the Saudis out west. Omar al-Bayoumi, Osama Bassan, 9/11 Commission interviewed both of them. They fled to Saudi Arabia. As for the Israelis, for those who are saying, oh, they were just acting like jerks celebrating the attacks, Urban Moving Systems, which was a company in Weehawken, New Jersey, owned by Dominic Suter, were not just monitoring the hijackers in New York, but there was also, and everybody likes to talk about the dancing Israelis, you have two Israelis in Pennsylvania on 9/11 and 9/12 that were from right past the highway of where Shanksville, Pennsylvania was. Now, these are two Israelis that nobody ever talks about that were working for Urban Moving Systems, and Roy Barak and Modi Bupel, who were two employees for Urban Moving Systems. And on September 12th, they were pulled over by Pennsylvania State Police. And when they interviewed them and say, hey, where were you coming from? And they said, well, we were going to, we were doing a move from Ohio to New Jersey. Well, guess what? There were no furniture inside the truck. And then when they contacted the FBI, and then they released them to the FBI, when the FBI contacted Dominic Suter, and they said, what were these two guys doing in York, Pennsylvania? Dominic Suter said this. He says, I have no idea because we don't have a client outside of New Jersey because of prior day's events. Quote, I find that strange, end quote. So when the FBI wanted to interview Dominic Suter for a second time, he fled to Israel. In fact, he left the whole warehouse full of furniture. In fact, for the past few weeks prior to 9/11, they didn't move anybody. And if you take a look at the FBI report, which you can find on scribd.com or archive.org, it's partly redacted. A lot of it's redacted anyway. But if you could read between the lines, you could see that the employees, these movers that were complaining about the Israelis that were working for moving systems, condemning the United States, saying that we should take over, and they were disparaging the United States. I'm not saying that, oh, this is what Israel thinks, but you do have Israeli nationalists inside this country that don't care about the United States. They only care about the Zionist state of Israel, or their movement inside Israel, which is a Zionist movement, nationalist movement, the Likud party. That doesn't represent all of Israel. That's the same thing for like the Saudis, the Wahhabi ideology that Osama Basnan and Omar al-Bayoumi belong to, and these hijackers belong to, that don't represent Muslims worldwide. In fact, a lot of Muslims condemn these acts. And so you have a lot of these anomalies that you truthers that pertain to these conspiracies are throwing away only because you are led to believe otherwise. So stop being a follower. Become a leader. And don't allow the prejudices of your worldviews, of politics, of Israel, of Muslims, of the State Department, or of whites, of blacks, or Jews and Gentiles, and the Democrats. All that is irrelevant. Proper, careful, conductive research involves only one thing: you being truthful to yourself and to this event. Because the only thing that matters is evidence. So, what I would suggest is that a new truth movement begins. And you have this movement that caters to the areas that I just outlined. And from there, maybe in the future we can get somewhere instead of going backwards, is what these truth movements have been doing, slowly going backwards because they can't go forwards. And I basically am appalled by some of these truth organizations. I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to leave architects and engineers out of it because I don't know anything about physics or engineering. That's just being truthful. But to the Lawyers Committee for 9/11, the Truth Action Project, and We Are Change, you have basically done nothing but purport these rabid conspiracy theorists. And I take offense to it because I'm a researcher myself. I like to think that I'm a careful researcher who you basically claim I'm a shill and I'm an operative. And you're the one who looks ridiculous, not me. And I can provide evidence for everything I say. That's why I use my name and I use my face, because I'm willing to back up anything I say. And a lot of you people don't, because you have a lot going for yourselves in terms of followers, in terms of money, in terms of popularity online. But you don't debate these issues. You don't have conversations about these issues with a person who can easily dismiss your conspiracy claims, because that's exactly what's going to happen to you. But there are good people in these truth movements, really good people. They're just afraid of being ostracized and condemned by the very people that they entrusted. And that's a real crime. But I would submit to you that the sacrifice is worth it, because there's only one thing that matters, and that's the truth.